Yes, guys, I know there's going to be one huge talking point in this race review, but I want to try and get onto that a little bit later because, you know, there were some other stories. Well, maybe. I don't know. But it is the review of the Italian Grand Prix, the Monza Grand Prix. Before we jump into that, I stumbled upon this public advertisement. I don't know if it was one that was made for the tickets or anything like that. I'm trying to remember. But majority of it's in Italian, including the month, which makes sense because it's Monza near Milano. But the small print is in English, and so is the Temple of Speed comment. I understand the Temple of Speed in a weird way because if you're Italian, you already know that Monza's the Temple of Speed, but yeah, a bit of a weird one. I couldn't make up their mind what language should be, but that's not going to be the talking point. And neither's the next thing we're going to be talking about. We like to talk about those sorts of less publicized winners. And look, there was a couple of talking points and shouts that could be for um, winners of the Grand Prix, whether that be Bortoletto, who qualified fantastically well, qualified in sixth and so started fifth because of Hamilton's penalty and ended up finishing seventh, which I don't think is shabby at all. Then you've got who else was it? Oh yeah, Isaac Hadjar qualified poorly. In fact, I think it was an engine problem. He had to start from the pit lane. He managed to get a point out at the end of it. Not too bad. And I've got to say, Kimi Antonelli recovered well. He's been struggling in the past few races. I think that was a good one for him to have ahead of what's going to be a really tricky race in a couple of weeks' time. But we're not going to talk about a couple of weeks' time just yet. We're going to focus on Monza. But I think my big one of the unpublicised winner has got to be Alex Albon. There's been a couple of races where him or the car have really struggled, and I don't think we're going to properly know who it is that's struggling, whether it's Williams themselves or whether it's Albon. But I think, yes, qualified 14th, struggled in the qualifying, finishing 7th, a really solid result. Sort of where you expect Williams to be throughout the season. Really, really good stuff. And Albon's just been great throughout the whole weekend, actually. Not, certainly nothing to be ashamed of. I suppose the big question is, and this is one of the first ones where I'd love for your comments on below. Is this just a Williams thing that they're rubbish everywhere else, but they're good at Monza? Because let's be honest, we've been here before. This was where Nick De Vries got his first points, for example. Williams do well at Monza, and I don't know whether this is a sign of things to come, which, as someone growing up watching Formula One in the 2000s and saw Williams at their, not at their best, but when they were certainly special, I would love to see them back. And I just feel like it's a bit of a flash in the pan in terms of it's a one-off, but I hope that this will continue. I really, really do. But yeah, fantastic for Alex Albon. Great stuff. Yada, yada, yada. We all know the subject that we're going to be talking about. The big, big, big subject. A subject that wasn't even going to rear its head until, the final 5 laps of the race? Yes, we're going to be talking about it. In 2021, it was Michael Massey. In 2025, it's Mercedes. Are we witnessing this manipulation, twisting of results to try and get an exciting world championship? I don't know. But what I can say is, I, amongst many, many other people watching the Grand Prix on Sunday, felt very uncomfortable. For those that don't know, which, given how widely publicised this has been, it's probably been really difficult to not know, Lando Norris was ahead of Oscar Piastri, and for some reason they wanted to pit later than everyone else and go on soft tyres. I don't think that strategy was a good strategy, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Lando Norris was then asked by his race engineer, does he want to pit first, or does Lando Norris want to pit first? Sorry, does Oscar Piastri want to pit first? Because Lando Norris, being the lead driver out of the two of them by being second instead of third, had that. And he said, give it to Oscar Piastri then. Don't want to get undercut by him, but give it to Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri goes in, pits, does a good pit stop, and then Lando Norris pits and doesn't have a good pit stop. In fact, has a pit stop that is so slow he ends up losing ground to Oscar Piastri. And then McLaren go on the radio to Oscar Piastri and say, basically, give up the position to Lando Norris because it's fair. And Oscar Piastri has a little moan, but obeys the instructions. Ultimately, a botched pit stop for Lando Norris turned out to not mean anything. Now, I'm going to start off with the very small point, and it's very small, that might defend McLaren, which was the wheel gun itself. I don't know if anyone saw it, but the wheel gun seems to have like LED lights on it, right? That tells you at what stage you are at the, in terms of getting the wheel off, securing it, everything like that. It looks like it goes red for undoing it and taking the wheel off. It goes green once you've secured the wheel on, and it flashes green and red when it basically goes, I don't think you've done it tight enough. Now, interestingly enough, the front left tyre, the wheel gun did flash green and red. But I don't think the engineer actually did any more tightening up after it, and then it went green. So maybe this is more of a fault with the system, that the electronics played up for Lando Norris, and because they view that as a technological glitch rather than a failure on anyone's part. This is not the case of Lando Norris not pitting on his box correctly, or the engineer's not trying hard enough, or things like that, or botching the pit stop. That maybe that's the reason for it. But this did not feel right. Here's what I'm going to say, though. McLaren, in a weird way, are very lucky. And why do I say that? Because at the end of the day, we're all talking about them. They're being interrogated for these sort of issues. They've opened the Pandora's box in terms of those issues, which we'll talk about that Pandora's box since they've opened it in a bit. So why are they lucky? Well, because despite what they say, they don't have two number one drivers. Now, that might seem like I'm insulting Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. In a weird way, the way I'm saying this is a bit of a compliment to them. Who are the drivers that come to mind when you think of number one drivers, either currently or of the past? In fact, let's trim it down a bit further. What about former McLaren drivers that have been number one drivers? You're probably thinking, if we start winding back a bit, probably Lewis Hamilton, definitely Alonso. You could probably throw Kimi Räikkönen in there. You definitely could throw Juan Pablo Montoya in there. Mika Hakkinen, I would say number one driver. And then Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost, definitely number one drivers. What would their reaction have been to all this going on? Do you think they would have obeyed the engineer's instructions to give up the place for Lando? Probably not. In fact, definitely not. They would have said, get lost. Why? Because they understand that this is a part of racing. Things happen. And they want the guarantee of the points. They can't trust that the same's going to happen the other way because they know that most racing drivers, possibly including their teammate, are jerks and won't obey the instructions. But that's not Oscar and Lando. I won't say the number two drivers, it's more like 1.5 for both of them. They are very quick, very rapid. They have this mentality of pushing forward and pushing hard, but they also are willing to do things for the team. Now, how long this goes on for, I don't know. But the fact is, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, whenever they're given instructions like this, I said I can't think of any that Lando Norris has been given, they have obeyed those instructions. So that's where McLaren are lucky. But they've opened this Pandora's box. So let's look inside Pandora's box of this McLaren misfortune of what counts as fairness and swapping around and what doesn't. Are positions a factor here? Like, here's the thing. If Oscar Piastri had had a botched pit stop, the likelihood is he would have finished or come out behind Charles Leclerc. He wasn't going to give, obviously Charles Leclerc wasn't going to give that back. And if he had passed Charles Leclerc, they weren't exactly going to say to Lando Norris, hey, could you drop back just a little bit and give Oscar Piastri a tow? Just to help him out a little bit. Of course not. There's people talking about Oscar Piastri's penalty that McLaren viewed as harsh at Silverstone. Again, whilst it's a bit more of a daft scenario of like giving up the positions, is that considered as something that's unfair that McLaren feel they should switch? When it comes to, here's a good example: Silverstone last year. Do you remember that one where the rain started falling down and Lando Norris pitted first, Oscar Piastri pitted the following lap? Could you really imagine McLaren going, yeah, Oscar Piastri's basically lost almost a lap. In fact, he had lost a lap because of us. So, Lando, can you pit for about a minute just so Oscar can catch up? Of course not. And if we're gonna carry on with this, does it go for retirements? Again, of course not. But McLaren have opened this Pandora's box. And here is where it's important. You can't predict luck. You can't predict this sort of thing. You cannot. We could be in a scenario where Oscar Piastri gets the worst look possible and just about hangs on until the end of the season, and that ends up with him a point, 2 points behind Lando Norris at the end. And we could be looking at this going, well, McLaren couldn't do anything about Oscar's bad luck, but when they had the opportunity to do something about Lando's bad luck, they acted on it. Could someone see that as being unfair? Again, possibly, I think so. It's one of those scenarios. The only time I've ever known a team to get involved at this level was during the Schumacher Barrichello days. You know, the team order situation with, where Barrichello was ordered to let Schumacher pass, or Ferrari, where Massa was allowed to allow Alonso past. And that wasn't down to luck; that was down to performance-based thing. But in a weird way, I feel like McLaren doing something worse, because they are essentially asking for two world championship rivals to be doing exactly the same as what Schumacher and Barrichello were doing and what Massa and Alonso were doing, when only the one that was let through had the championship points. I know that sort of doesn't apply in terms of Schumacher and Barrichello because it was so early on in the season, but you know what I mean. This feels so wrong because it's a title rival thing. And here's the thing, Lando Norris never asked for this. In fact, he didn't speak at all. And actually, if you look at the sector times after Lando Norris pitted, but before the radio message came out, Lando Norris was catching Oscar. It was almost as if Lando went, right, team have messed up. I need to put the work in for them. Head down. I'm just going to race. I get the feeling that if McLaren hadn't have implemented these team orders, Lando probably would have passed Oscar anyway. And all McLaren needed to do was papaya rules and basically go, don't go daft, guys. You're racing. Because, like I say, Lando actually looked quicker on the tyres. Maybe that's because Oscar's mood was killed. I don't know. But yeah, it just all feels wrong. And people are going to throw accusations out that McLaren are fixing the championship. They're being, they're showing favouritism to Lando Norris. And I suppose this is the best way of putting it. Correlation doesn't equal causation in regards to the favouritism to Lando Norris. And in terms of the accusations of fixing a championship, the consequences don't equal the intention. Make no mistake, McLaren aren't intending to fix the championship, and they aren't. They don't actively show favouritism towards Lando Norris. Do you know what's going on? They're trying too hard. They're overthinking things. Because guess what? The most amount of fixes they've had to do has been on Lando Norris' side. Because right now, Oscar Piastri hasn't had many things go wrong his side, apart from the penalty. So, I don't think McLaren are favouring Lando Norris, and I don't think they're fixing the championship. I just think they're overthinking the entire thing. Let them race. If you make a mistake, so what? You've just in doing nothing about it, that means that you don't have to stress if you make a mistake again. But you doing this means you give yourself headaches whenever this sort of thing goes on. Any sort of bad luck for a driver, you're going to go, right, okay, then, was this in the driver's interest or was it not? Was it our fault or was it not? Can we fix this or can we not? All these sort of things, you never had to ask the questions to yourself. Andrea Stella, you've given your team an aneurysm that they didn't deserve and didn't need, because it's, by the way, if anyone's seen into team battles in the past, whether it be Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, or whether it be Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost, it's enough of an aneurysm for a team on its own. You've potentially made it worse for yourselves because all these questions are going to get asked. And all of the politics internally has now become external politics. None of us need this. In fact, here's the thing. In 2021, I mentioned the Michael Massey situation, right? In 2021, Michael Massey clearly had the intention of making it an exciting championship. He wasn't fixing it in favour of one driver or another. He just wanted entertainment and wanted to do all he could to make entertainment. What happened? Max Verstappen fans and Lewis Hamilton fans were all against each other. Of course they were. That's what happens in a title battle. You're probably now going to have the same of Oscar Piastri fans and Lando Norris fans that are going to be at each other's throats. But the minute Michael Massey got involved, all of them focused on him. Verstappen fans were pointing the finger at him, saying that he was being too lenient on Hamilton in certain penalties and certain incidents. Obviously, Hamilton fans turned on him in the last race and a couple of other times, I'm pretty sure. Do you really want Lando Norris fans and Oscar Piastri fans turning all their passion into accusations against their own team? Of course not. But that's what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. How do I know? I've seen it. I've experienced it. McLaren have just made things a lot difficult for themselves. And these next, 9 races? These next 9 races are going to be the longest of McLaren's career. They're going to feel like the longest. Forget the Senna Prost championship. That was between the drivers, that controversy. No one was targeting McLaren for that. So McLaren didn't need to feel stress in terms of their public image, because that was all about Ayrton Senna's public image and Alan Prost's public image. But this, McLaren do have to worry about it. In fact, this is the interesting thing. I bet if you looked at social media, none of the Lando Norris fans are slating Oscar Piastri, or very few of them. And very few of the Oscar Piastri fans are slating Lando Norris. But I think at least all of the Oscar Piastri fans have got a little bit of rage against McLaren. And here's something as well. You want all this thing about fairness? Your drivers are doing impeccable jobs in terms of protecting your image. They are being your PR guys. Now, I know they're paid more than you, but they did nothing wrong. And they're taking the questions that could be seen as inflammatory, and they're having to play politics. They're having to play clever. They're having to play nicey-nicey. You've given them more work to do because of your mistake. We're really talking fair here. Because right now, it does not feel fair. Mistakes happen. Always happen. Someone misses a bolt on a wheel. An engine fails. Someone overestimated how long an engine would last. A freak piece of debris gets in a car. I remember 2007 Brazil and what happened to Hamilton's car, that something got caught up in the event. Something could happen like that. Freak incidents happen all the time. But when you layer the mistake or the bad luck with extra levels of trying to fix it, it is a very risky path. It's like anything in life. Let's take food, right? Sometimes you have that wonderful recipe, right? Adding further ingredients adds the risk that you could ruin the recipe. You have to get it absolutely bang on right. And what McLaren have done is added ingredients to a spicy recipe and turned it into this uncomfortable, sick feeling in every fan's experience. And it all balances out in the long term if you leave it be. It does. Situations happen that go against your driver. Situations happen that go for your driver. Take, again, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. There was a battle in, 2016 for the title? Went to the last race. Nico Rosberg's engine failed. Lewis Hamilton got the win. Was it 2016? I'm pretty sure it was. And then in Nico Rosberg's last year, Lewis Hamilton got an engine failures that basically handed Nico Rosberg the win. Now, did it feel sickening to see it as a Lewis Hamilton fan, to see Nico Rosberg get the win? Yes, of course it did. But that's luck. That's just how it is. We see so many situations of like the unluckiest driver that's ever existed. And I appreciate the desire for fairness from McLaren. I really do. But there comes a time where you just have to let it go. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Monza, on McLaren. Very contentious issue, McLaren. So if you've got any comments on your thoughts on any scenarios in Pandora's box that they've opened that could be mentioned and thought of, pop them in the comments, because I will definitely have a look at them. And pop a like, subscribe to the channel if you can. And yeah, until next time, guys. Cheerio.